Hi, everyone. I'm Heather, and thank you so much for joining us for another Homeschool Live. Today, we will be hearing from Lori Delk of Upwards Reading. Please share this video with your friends, post it in any homeschooling groups that you're in, and as always, please comment. And if you have any questions for Lori as she's talking, leave them in those comments so we can get to those throughout the interview. And now I would like to introduce Lori Delk. Lori has her master's degree in speech pathology from Georgia State University College of Education. She founded and now directs a private therapy practice that treats children with language and articulation disorders, reading disorders, and learning disorders such as dyslexia and autism. In 2013, she began to develop Upwards Reading, which is what she's going to talk about today. And I'm so excited to hear about her program. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lori.
I'm so happy to be here with everyone.
Well, I would just like to dive right into the interview and tell us about Upwards Reading. Can you let us know more about Upwards Reading?
Absolutely. So Upwards Reading was designed to teach kids how to read and spell the English language. And we incorporated the latest research. We did a bunch of research for about a year and a half, myself, a PhD level speech pathologist with all of her background in reading, and then a reading specialist, master's level reading specialist as well. And we looked at research and we came up with a program that followed the most up-to-date information for teaching kids how to read and spell in English. The reason I decided to do this is because as I was working with homeschooling parents, I found that oftentimes they had limited resources and they also had limited knowledge in how to teach reading. And yet they had the heart and they were very smart people and willing to do that. And there was no reason these parents couldn't do it. So we found that also, oftentimes to get training in reading, extensive training, it was cost prohibitive. And as a homeschooling parent, you know there's not a lot of time to go to school, learn to teach to read, and then teach all your kids to read. Okay, that's a difficult thing to do. I know I raised 4 kids, and basically I was trying to keep from being tied up all the time.
Right.
Anyway, so we created this program with 4 key areas. It has phonological awareness and phonics, okay, because we found that's a very important part. And I'll get into that a little bit more later on this morning. But we need to teach kids to hear the sounds, to be able to break them down, to be able to blend them together, to be able to rhyme, to be able to manipulate sounds where you take a word and you change one sound and make it into another word.
Right.
So anyway, those things are important. Then, of course, phonics, where you take the sound symbol and you pair it with the letter, the letter and the sound together. And we work on that. We also incorporate sight word instruction as one part because there are some words in the English language, I'm sure you've run into them, that do not follow phonics. So we have to point those out and teach those explicitly. We also teach syllabication and structural analysis. So we have this really neat part of Upwards where we have a detective. His name is Detective Covrell, and he teaches syllabication. And syllabication is so important because it helps us understand the mystery of what that vowel says.
Wow.
Okay, the hard part about learning to read really is not the consonants. We can teach consonant blends pretty easily. We can teach consonant digraphs like TH, SH, CH, QU, WH. The kids get that. Kindergarten, first grade, that's not hard. But the hard part is the vowel part.
Right.
So we have Inspector Covrell that using his name, we teach 6 different syllabication types: closed, open, vowel team, bossy R, magic E, and consonant LE. So with their Inspector Covrell, they can figure out anything. We also incorporate, which research says we need to do, high quality literature. So I had been teaching reading for many, many years before I developed Upwards. And one of my biggest complaints was, while there's some good decodable readers out there, no program really had enough to help the child to generalize what I was teaching them. So when I created Upwards, we decided that it would be a good idea to give them more opportunity to generalize in connected text. So this high quality literature, it's wholesome. It's got a story thread that goes through the book. So here's an example of two of them. We've got 4 different levels. This is just
Okay.
2 levels. But so there's a story thread. And so instead of just random decodable readers that are not connected, we have
Right.
characters that we follow.
For
And
all 4? So, like, it's the same characters for all 4?
yes, yes,
Mm.
absolutely. And when we were developing Upwards, we decided that instead of stickers being the carrot or whatever you use as a reinforcer for reading, I wanted the books to be the carrot.
Mm.
I want kids to learn to love to read. And that's what I
Right.
hear from parents, whether their child's in a public school, a private school, a homeschool situation, all parents want their kids to desire and to have this love for reading. And so what better way than to use books that they actually enjoy? And so that's what we developed. And I found that it's true. The kids really do love the books. As a matter of fact, they'll sometimes, I do therapy in my office for kids who have reading disorders, and you can use Upwards with kids who are developing normally or with kids with reading disorders or something like dyslexia. And they'll come into my office and they'll beg, can we read the book first? And I'll say, no,
Aw.
I have to teach you
Mm.
what you're going to be using in your reading today so that
Yeah.
you can do it well. So I teach them and then they get through that so they can read their book. So it really has become, it is a carrot, which is awesome.
Right.
Now, the other kind of high quality literature that's in Upwards are books that we recommend for parents to read aloud,
Mm.
because listening comprehension is a prerequisite to reading comprehension. So we start them in kindergarten or even sooner. I mean,
Wow.
sooner the better. But in our level 0, we recommend read aloud books that the mom or dad or both can read aloud to their child, and then ask comprehension questions that are age appropriate.
Wow.
And and so you'll love these as it gets harder, when they're in second, third grade, and you're reading more difficult books. The good news is that the answers are included in our resource manual,
Mm.
our reference.
Thank you. As a homeschool mom, thank you.
Yes. I was working with a teacher at a school recently, and she was reading Mr. Popper's Penguins, and she's like, I need to ask the class some comprehension questions. And I said, funny you should mention that. Maybe you want to use the reference guide here. And I handed it to her. She goes, seriously? Oh my goodness, this is
Aw.
awesome. So yes, that worked very well for her. So in Upwards, we have different components. There's, first of all, a workbook that the child will have. So the workbook looks something like this. This would be your level 1, which would be equivalent to like a first grade.
Right.
And so there are workbook pages that I got this backwards here. Yeah, that the kiddos can see while you work with them, and you have a teacher manual that corresponds with that. So the workbook has pages. Now, not everything you do with your child will be in the workbook, because there's some extra activities that you may do in a sand tray, or you may do using Play-Doh, different multisensory type task. And we have also, we have phonics cards. So for example, if I look in this one, this is a level 2, so this is a level higher. So as we teach, for example, what I call the Mac truck rule or the CK rule, if you have a 1-syllable word with a short vowel sound that ends with the k sound, like in Mac, you spell it CK. And the awesome thing for the parent is that this is all on the card.
Wow, that's incredible.
You don't have to have it memorized yourself. And then we also, so that's that. And then we also have our pink sight word cards. And we have methodology for teaching that as well. That is in our reference guide. We have the decodable readers that I mentioned. We have the resource kit, which is the sand tray, the cards.
Wow.
Use Play-Doh. Also, there's a recommended reading list, which I mentioned earlier. And then in the earlier grades, kindergarten and first grade, we based our handwriting on handwriting without tears to some degree. The introduction of sounds in order like C, O, A, G, and D, which are easier letters to make.
Right.
So, we had training in handwriting without tears and thought that was a pretty good avenue to go down. And I know a lot of families use that with their children.
Right.
So that's pretty much, we developed it. We saw that there was a definite need, and typically when a family buys it, they 9 months later, a year later, they're getting the next level because the kids are making such nice progress. And with progress, research shows that we're supposed to monitor that, and how a child is performing basically guides what we do next.
Right.
So we have a progress manual, which is very easy to use in every single level, where you can keep your information. You do a quick test at the end of the week or a quick assessment. The little ones, it's really fast, 3 minutes. As they get a little bit older, it may take 10 minutes, 15. But this drives what we do next, because based on best practices, if they can't do what we've taught them, we need to go back and revisit it and make sure they learn it to mastery.
And that's absolutely okay. And I love that you have this option, because for some homeschooling families, they have to have the reports to submit to their school districts every year. And then there's the states that don't require that, but the parent still wants to have the records for themselves and to know if they need to hold their kid back, which is absolutely fine. Most states allow that. If you go to them and say, you know what, I think I need to hold my kid back, they're fine with that. Or if you need to, it's okay. And
right. But we do this week to week. So we don't wait till we get to the end of the year and then hold them back. At the end of the year,
beautiful.
if they haven't learned CK, then I say, let's spend a couple more days reviewing CK.
Right. Okay. I see.
Then we're going to go on. So you may in the end find that that's the beauty about teaching following practices, is that you're supposed to go at your child's rate of mastery. And so if it takes a specific child 10 days instead of 5 days to do it, and you do have to hold them back, at least you have solid data showing what that rate of retention. And I don't have a problem with that either, but you do need to have the information and the data, and it's all in one little book for you. And if you run into a jam, we get contacted now and then if a family's having a specific problem with something. Sometimes kids struggle at the beginning with blending, but when families reach out, the first thing I ask is, please send me your information, your testing information from your progress manual, and then I can answer almost any question.
Wow.
So, and then we help the parents to move forward.
I mean, it sounds like this is a very homeschool friendly curriculum. The parent isn't getting it and saying, I need to do this on this day, this on this day. It allows for that flexibility to continue the CK sound if they have to. I mean, that's a homeschool mom's dream, because I mean, every child's different and you might need to focus, or you might not. They might speed through it and then you can get to the next book. Like you said, that's a reward.
Exactly. So if you're on the flip side, if you have a child that only needs 3 or 4 days to learn whatever it is, you can go ahead.
Right.
I mean, you can move right on ahead, and that is okay. And the other homeschool dream is, I'll kind of tell you a little bit about why I did this, is we developed teacher manuals, one for each workbook. And in the teacher manual, there's a glance at a week that you'll be able to see. So here, Monday through Friday, and it tells you what to do each day. And it tells you what you're doing in phonics. It tells you what you're doing in sight words. It tells you what story you're going to read and what language and literature you're going to read aloud to them. And then it gets very specific. So you turn the page and it says Monday and it tells you exactly what to do.
Wow. And all of our moms out there who love to plan and have everything like laid out for them are really excited about this right now.
Yeah, every lesson plan is completely written out. I found as a therapist that I was spending more time on reading lesson plans than I was on anything else I did. Language,
Wow.
stuttering, whatever it was, articulation, which is sound acquisition, kids with W for R. I didn't spend as much time on those things as I did on reading. It was very time consuming. I'd be at my office late at night working on these. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Let's just do it once, hire a team, do it and do it well and not have to revisit it. And so that's what I did. And this is what I use on a daily basis with kids. And it really, really works. Now I'm going to give you what other clinicians that use it and parents. And I work, like right now, I'm probably working with 100 homeschool moms. What they tell me is there's a 3-week time period to get comfortable using it. Okay. And after that, there is very little prep time.
Wow.
I mean,
that's wonderful.
And so, of course, when people start to use it a lot, if you're doing it with all your kids, which a lot of the moms do, they're on child number 4, maybe, they don't have to do anything but open up the lesson plan to the next page and move on. So that's the beauty of it.
And that's a godsend.
Yes, it is, because I know it's hard. It's hard raising kids, and it's hard schooling them at the same time and having a good quality of life, in the evening. You don't want to be doing lesson plans all night.
Right. Mm-hmm. What would you see right now as the biggest challenge that parents face when teaching their children to read?
The biggest challenge parents teach, probably that there's a misunderstanding of how we should teach reading. Mm-hmm. So I guess the biggest challenge is this fundamental misunderstanding in the United States on how children learn to read and spell. A little piece of information that I find fascinating is that according to the U.S. Department of Education, 54% of the U.S. adults aged 16 to 74 lack proficiency in literacy reading. They are below the equivalent of a 6th grader. 54%, ages 16 to 74. And I find that very alarming and very distressing, makes me very sad. And this includes our entire school system. It includes public schools, private schools, and some of the best private schools have a misunderstanding. And so some of their kids get left behind, sadly, that are very, very high functioning cognitively, but have a underlying dyslexia. And then also in homeschooling. I mean, it's just across the board. So the failure to teach students to read is a result of not applying the knowledge and research we have on how to teach reading. Okay. So I kind of want to do a brief history. It's just so you guys can, many of you may already know this, but there's many people that don't, that back in the 30s, we started out with more of a phonics, 1930s, a phonics-based program. It was Orton Gillingham, and some of you have heard of that in homeschooling. It means it's a phonics-based program. And so that was very popular in the 30s and basically all up into the 80s, that things were taught based on phonics. Okay. And Then, about the 80s, Noam Chomsky came along, and he came up with this idea that, well, based on linguist information, kids learn language um, based on, it's just intrinsic, based on what they hear. You can use motherese, you can talk to your kids. Typically, unless they have a disorder, most kids are just going to pick it up
Right.
naturally. You coo, you go through the different Brown stages, but they just do it naturally. You don't even know you're doing it. Okay, but they learn. And so Chomsky decided that, wow, if kids can learn verbal language intrinsically, maybe they can learn to read just naturally.
Mm.
So if we just um, give them an environment that's rich in words and rich in language, they're going to learn to read naturally. So we show them a bunch of words. We drive to McDonald's, we show them McDonald's, and that's what that looks like. And the stop sign says stop. And we use words in the environment. And then we read aloud to them and let them learn that way. Well, um, there are some what we learned is that there's some good things from both sides. Okay. And so back in, I guess it was 1997, a national reading panel was convened to analyze all the research that had been done by Chomsky. And they came up with an approach called the balanced approach. It takes
Mm.
the best things from phonics, it takes the best things from uh, Chomsky's more whole language approach.
Right.
And so the negative with phonics only approach is that it can be boring to kids. And you don't give them the freedom to write and create. So some of that's good, right? Maybe they can't spell perfectly, but they can spell well enough to express themselves. So
Right.
that allows, with phonics being so tight, it allows the kids to have a little bit more freedom. Um, but we still found that with phonics, we need to have the systematic and explicit teaching. Okay,
Right.
that we need to do that in a balanced approach. That's what was decided, and we're still not doing this in all the classrooms. It needs to be multisensory. So a balanced approach needs to be systematic and cumulative. There's a developmental progression, and some programs differ a tiny bit in that progression, but they're pretty much similar if they
Right.
follow true developmental patterns. For example, we teach short vowel sounds first, then we typically teach the magic E, and then we get into early vowel teams, and then we get into more, bossy R, and more complex vowel teams.
Mm.
We're doing it systematic and cumulative, multisensory, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. We want all of those inputs
Right.
for our kids. Um, Also, a balanced approach must be assessment based, which, if we talked about this a few minutes ago, that informs instruction. We can speed up or we can slow down based on that information. To do assessments and to not use them, there's no reason to do them.
Right.
What's the purpose? All right. And then teaching should be child focused. And I love this finding because children learn at different rates. If you're homeschooling, you have the flexibility to meet that need like no other system has.
Mm.
So I love to see this, and these kids benefit from this. So kids do best in one-on-one or in small groups
Right.
to read, because that way we can navigate their rate better. Also, kids, this research showed that kids do best and they generalize their skills when they have a positive and interactive relationship with their teacher.
Mm.
Problem with these during COVID when 20 kids in the class were on Zoom, I'm not
Yeah.
against doing therapy online, I do it. Or to do reading class online, I do it. But I do it one-on-one or small group
Right.
because I can't be interactive if
Yeah.
I have too big of a group. And that is something that is necessary. When a child starts making a mistake, we need to stop them right then and then help them to come up with the correct answer and move on so they don't learn it wrong.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And
So,
then it helps parents realize they don't need to have as much time as the school did. It's okay if you do it in small little segments because they have that one-on-one. And if children have problems in public school, then they're going to go to a tutor and they're going to have that one-on-one. So the school system sees the value in that. So as the homeschool parent, you get to do that. I love that you were able to share with us that history, and now how we have that like blended approach here, talking about using both methods, because a lot of parents, I think like me, who was a product of the 80s and 90s learning of just throwing that out there, or learning to read. When I started teaching my kids, I didn't really know phonics. I knew how to read fine. I have a college education, but the basics of like the phonics that you use in your system, that was all new to me. I knew how it worked, but use the terminology I didn't know. So I love that you have all of that in your books and it's all spelled out for parents like me who are at a loss,
well,
and it's easier now.
yeah, and yeah, we're different generations. We're taught different ways. I was
Mhm.
back in Dick, Jane, and Sally, but spot run. I don't know. Anyway, um, but the thing is that about 70% of the kids can learn like you did. Okay, so you were saying, well, you didn't really need the phonics. Well, one thing we do know is that students who learn phonics, even if they don't need it for decoding, we see better spelling scores when they're taught
Mm,
phonics for encoding or spelling. So that's a benefit for all kids, whether they
right.
really need it or not. Um, but there are 30%, 20 to
Yeah.
30% of the
Oh,
kids.
yeah. And I'm teaching my kids using phonics now for sure, now that I understand the
So
importance of it.
when I
Absolutely.
walk into a room and there's 20 kids in a class, and I think, there's going to be 4 to 6 kids in this class that are just going to they're not going to learn this year.
Wow. Yeah.
That's alarming. And if you've got your own kids, if you take a percent, uh, there's a chance that maybe one of
Yeah.
them will have problems. I had one. She's a college
Yeah.
professor now.
Mm,
So it's not, she learned to decode and encode, and
yeah.
and she does fine. But early on it was a little bit difficult. So
Right.
even in a family with certain genetic patterns, you may have a child that struggles a little bit. And
Right.
the beautiful thing is it's just not a big deal. It's so
Right.
easy to solve this problem. Um,
Right.
yeah. And then my thought, of course, is, well, since we don't know for sure which of our kids are going to be the one that might have some struggles, why not teach them all following best practices and then
Yes.
run into.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of my reasoning and thinking
Hmm.
behind it all. But anyway, going back to this child focused therapy, that's the fourth point for this balanced approach, and that's a huge benefit of homeschooling.
Yeah.
So using this information gleaned from research, basically, from my point of view, there's no longer any excuses for anyone using outdated and ineffective methods to teach our kids to read. Because if we follow best practices, it will allow us to teach children to read.
Mm,
This leads to reading comprehension, which is our ultimate goal. And that in turn opens your kids' minds to endless information. Now, when your children are young, you're going to want to monitor that endless information they receive. Be very careful with that. I always was, and I am so glad I was. My kids are all adults now, but I am grateful, and they are just well adjusted contributing members of society, and I love them to pieces. It also opens the world to language and reasoning and thinking. And these are where we're really going with all of this.
Right.
Reading is simply a platform to gather information so your children can be independent learners eventually and be able to weigh the information and make good decisions. So it matters. I've seen my four grow up. I've got one who's in med school right now, and he's getting a lot of stuff, information thrown at him where he has to use reasoning and thinking beyond just learning the vast amount of information that students have to learn in med school. But about, what's ethical, what's the right decision to make based on this information. And he's had many years where he's been able to learn to reason and think, and now as a young adult he's doing a very good job. And that's where we want it to go. We want it to go to the point where these kids grow up to be young adults contributing to society and can reason and think for themselves, because there's a lot of information out there that I consider information I wouldn't want to follow, and I have to use my reasoning and thinking to determine that. Also, I think every kid should be given the opportunity to reach their highest God-given potential, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So I work with kids who do have significant learning disabilities sometimes, and many of them can learn to read. Not all of them, but any that I put into therapy to teach it, they have been able to. I work with kids with hearing impairments. I work with kids with autism. I work with kids that are just behind and they have no cognitive issues or dyslexia. They just were in a bad schooling situation, or something happened in life that derailed them for a year or something. Or even they were severely ADHD and needed to be working on that and getting into a better environment for teaching that. So if we look at Upwards, the reason I developed it is so that parents can have everything on their shelf right in front of them to pull. They don't have
love that.
And trying to find different things. It's all there. It's systematic, it's explicit, it works, and it follows best practices.
Well, I'm sure many watching are starting to get really excited about implementing this with their kids. The parents that are saying, I know my kid can do it, I just need the right tools, and you are providing that. So can you tell our audience where they can purchase your materials?
Yes, you can go to www.upwardsreading.com, and it will give you all the information you need. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. You can leave a message. And I just want parents to understand that there's nothing more important than to teach your kids to read, teaching a young child to read. And so if your child's still young, make sure you're doing that. However, if they're older and you feel like, wow, it wasn't done right, whether it was, homeschool situation, something happened in life, if they were in a school that was not good, it's never too late. Never, never, never. I have a great deal of my caseload of middle schoolers and high schoolers who were not taught to read. They basically memorized sight words for years. And eventually the amount of vocabulary that you're expected to read as you get older and older gets too high. And you can't keep up anymore. And so I see these children, these teenagers, and we work on Upwards. We get through it, we generalize it, and we apply it to other books like To Kill a Mockingbird, just normal Romeo and Juliet. I've read a separate piece. I mean, just in the last month with students that have gotten through Upwards.
Wow.
We apply it to their literature courses, and and they're doing beautifully. And it is so exciting, and they love to read. Okay. Now, I'm not telling you they love to read when they start with me, but once we get through it and they understand the world that's open to them, they actually love it. And so that's the exciting part to me.
That is
Don't give
awesome.
up. If for any reason you feel frustrated, please don't give up. Okay.
That is so encouraging. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and for telling us about your program. Deborah, she said that she loves when a child learns to love reading, and I agree with Deb. It's so rewarding to see that. So thank you for providing that opportunity for so many children.
Yeah.
And
Happy to do that. And if you have, you can go to www.upwardsreading.com if you want to find out any more information about our decodable readers or the program itself. And if you have any specific questions, you can leave a message and we will answer it. Okay.
awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me today. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. We appreciate your support of our homeschool lives. And if you have not already heard, tomorrow we will be having a homeschool live where Paul and Gina Suarez will be interviewing Kirk Cameron about his upcoming movie, The Homeschool Awakening. Please tune in right here. If you're watching on YouTube right now, we'll be streaming there. If you're watching on Facebook right now, we're going to be streaming there. So go ahead and check out either our Facebook page or YouTube page and click that notification button so you will be notified when we go live tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And you can leave questions during the interview if you have any questions for Kirk Cameron himself. So we really hope to see you there. And we thank you for tuning in for Lori's interview today. And please, if you have any questions for her, I would love for you to reach out to her and ask her yourself. And if you look in the comments right now, you'll see links both for Lori and for our upcoming events. So thank you so much for your support. We will see you next time on another Homeschool Live.